What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And I'm Dave Benson.
Well, I'm Nick Yother, and we're glad to have you. We are officially started into our Witness at the Cross series. This is a church-wide study that we're doing. I think we have 3 total classes that are doing it, and we're also doing it in service and stuff like that. And today we're talking about the bystanders and the scoffers. And I think this is cool, the actual study, and how it's kind of going into perspectives of the people who kind of saw those last moments of Jesus' life.
Right. Yeah. Perspective is more like an account of who they were. But yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So we kick this off. So let's do it.
Let's do it. Well, Dave, I'm not going to lie. I'm flying a little blind today. I actually ended up teaching in children's ministry today, so I have no idea what you talked about.
Yeah, we'll get through it.
But I'm kind of excited. I think I'll probably have some questions that I might not have had because I would have heard your answers or something like that. So maybe this will be a unique way to do the podcast.
Sure. We'll see anyway.
We'll see for sure.
We should also mention that this is the 99th podcast.
Yeah, we are one away from our centennial mark.
Next time is the big one.
That'll be fun. I really can't believe we've done that many.
I can.
Really? I mean, we've been
doing it
consistent.
a while.
Yeah, but like 2 years almost.
Yeah,
I guess.
sure. Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
So we kind of use this time, and I normally ask some weird, kind of get to know you question. And the question I've got for you today, Dave, is this: what movie could you watch any amount of times? Like, because I know, like, for me, like, some movies are like, okay, I saw it once, I don't need to see it again. What's one movie that you could just watch over and over and over again?
Well, that's a good question. Princess Bride, I've seen a bunch.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings.
Ooh.
I've watched
the
it
whole
a
trilogy?
lot. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but that's not one movie, that's 3. But
Yeah.
I've watched that a lot. So yeah, movies like that.
Okay.
But, yeah.
You know, I was thinking, Dave, because we're now recording on Sundays.
Right.
We should bring in like a kid every now and then and have them ask you a random question, or me.
Sure.
And that would be this time. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah. We'll do that.
Just for kicks and giggles.
Yeah.
All right, Dave. So let's jump in.
Okay. So we're in. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and you again, you got to fill me in on what we're talking about. So go for it.
So we're in the season of Lent, which is this 40-day period between Ash Wednesday and Easter Sunday, or 40 thereabout. There's actually a few more days than that, but you don't put Sundays in the count. In which, as we're taking this Lenten journey together, we made the decision to do a book study alongside. So my series, what I'm preaching on, is based on this book, Witness at the Cross, by Amy Jill Levine. Amy Jill Levine is a scholar. She taught, I think she's retired now, but she taught at Vanderbilt Divinity, very well respected and well known. She's Jewish, which is interesting. She taught New Testament, but so she brings that perspective into it. As well. But I love this book, and I'll tell you why. And I've done some other series on books, and they're usually written by preachers, and the preachers tend to do their chapters sort of like sermons. And so when I'm looking at that stuff, I'm going like, well, what am I going to preach on? Am I just going to tell all your stories? But this is a little more academic, and so I think it's very interesting. Some other people have thought it was very interesting. The book itself.
Yeah.
But other people said, well, it's very academic. But you see the kind of stuff that I will kind of get together and then make a sermon out of it. And so I'm finding it actually an easier sermon, easier resource to preach from. And so, but anyway, Amy Jill Levine. And so we actually kind of began on Ash Wednesday when we did... looked at Simon of Cyrene, who was the first witness at the cross. And today we moved into, turns out, first of all, there was a lot of people at the cross.
Yeah.
And you were talking about like their perspective. I think sometimes like when we've done like nativity ones, we really try to get in the mind of the the shepherds or Mary or whatever.
Right.
I think this one we're just kind of looking at them and their behavior and how they were and maybe what we can learn from them. And I said Wednesday night, and I said it again this morning, some of these are cautionary to us. Now, when we looked at Simon of Cyrene, I think there's some compelling things that we can learn from him.
Yeah.
But today we looked at bystanders and scoffers. And the scripture that we looked at was from Matthew, and it talked about how, people were deriding Jesus. They were saying, why don't you come down from the cross? Or, look at him up there on the cross. He said, that he was going to tear down the temple, and 3 days later he was going to build it again. And, they kind of missed the whole point of what Jesus was saying there. So there was a lot of this derision and bullying that went on while Jesus was hanging on the cross. And so, the question that I started with was really kind of this big why. Why? This man who had done nothing wrong. This man, then when he went to, appear before Pilate, when he was being put through this trial, Pilate was basically, I can't find anything wrong with them. And no one gave any reasons. They only said, crucify him. Or in the case of, Barabbas, they said, well, give us Barabbas. We'd rather have Barabbas, this known criminal. They had this tradition of releasing a prisoner. We'd rather have Barabbas. And so you would hear this like, this must be a pretty bad guy.
Yeah, like why they talk so much smack, and it's like, what?
Yeah, this guy's be.
We don't see what he did.
This guy's got to be terrible.
Yeah.
But yet there was nothing wrong with him, and Pilate himself said, I can't find anything wrong with it, and literally washed his hands of him. Okay, you want to do it? Crucify him.
Yeah.
And so they take him out where he's crucified. And then they began mocking him and teasing him and doing all sorts of stuff. And, what did he deserve to do all of that?
Yeah.
And so I started with this why. Why did this happen? What about human beings gets on those kind of bandwagons? Because, there possibly were a lot of different folks that were there on Palm Sunday shouting hosannas than that were there at the cross. But maybe some of the same, certainly some of the same. So how did they change so much? And so we can sort of try to think in our mind how this could have happened. Maybe they were spreading a lot of false rumors about him, and maybe the leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees and all of them were sort of egging the crowd on to, mock him.
Gang mentality, like what we call now gang mentality,
exactly.
is such a hard thing.
Right.
A lot of people just kind of go with whatever the crowds are saying.
And that was what it was, the crowd mentality.
Yeah.
And, we could also, I pointed out, like during that time for sport, they had gladiators fight to the death. And so maybe it was just a much more barbaric time.
Yeah.
But yet, I don't think that's the question, because you don't really have to ask why because of what you just said. That gang bullying mentality that's out there where people jump on the bandwagon, and it's everywhere, right?
Everywhere.
You see it in our politics.
I mean, you see it in our celebrities. You see it in sports teams. You know what I mean? Like just how people will go out. Like some people will just hate players because they heard they were supposed to hate this player or whatever. You know what I mean?
Oh, we talked a lot about Taylor Swift and Travis through the Super Bowl stuff. But I mean, all the hate that's going their way. I mean, love her or like her, but just just some really outrageous stuff about them that's out there, and people jumping on the internet, and just that kind of mob mentality that's out there that just wants to hate people. And, you also can look through human history and see it happening. I've mentioned this morning in the service, the Salem witch trials, where all the mob mentality that went around there. And then, but even in like slavery, and Nazi Germany, and if you want a wake-up call around that about how it was in America at the time, we're on this side of the Holocaust. Yeah. And so it's pretty easy to say, well, that was a really, really horrible thing. But at the time, there were a lot of politicians and a lot of people in America who were going like, no, we don't want to get involved with that, this horrible thing that was going on. I use the example of a Hotel Rwanda. Did you ever see that movie?
I didn't see the movie.
Don Cheadle and Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah. And it's about the genocide that took place in Rwanda, where about 1 million people were killed, mercilessly killed from the governing tribe, killing the minority.
Right.
And there's this pretty powerful scene in the movie where it's towards the end. Joaquin Phoenix is a journalist who's gone and is shooting a documentary about it. And Don Cheadle is a person who's a national who's trying to, speak up for the people there. He's Rwandan himself. And so he comes and he talks to Joaquin Phoenix towards the end of the movie. He says, I'm so glad you're doing this because now people will finally see and they can intervene and they will intervene. And Joaquin Phoenix says, well, do you think it's wrong to show it if people don't intervene? And he says, no, they have to intervene. They've seen all this, unhumanity that's going on. They have to intervene. And Joaquin Phoenix says, and he wasn't trying to be cynical. I mean, his heart was there, but he said, I think what's going to happen is people will watch this and they will say, oh my God, that's terrible. And then they'll go back to eating their dinner. And so we see stuff around like that, in our world today.
Yeah, I mean, especially like on Facebook after a tragedy happens or something like that, there will be a lot of people who will, change their picture to some sort of cause or whatever, and that would be the extent of jumping into it.
Right. Yeah, this is something. But yeah, I mean, and then we move on to the next news cycle of whatever it is. And so, we see something that happens like Russia invading Ukraine, and, we might say, oh, that's terrible. And then, and we don't really quite understand it, but there's a lot of us just say, well, that's their thing.
Yeah.
And so I guess the line would be with bystanders and scoffers. I mean, there's the scoffers that have jumped on that. And maybe some of this politicization, maybe we're on one side or another. But I fear, and this was my thing, that in this message series, we're going to have some people that we should emulate. And then there's going to be some others that are cautionary tales that we need to guard and see how that is in our own lives.
Yeah.
And bystanders and scoffers, particularly the bystanders, is the thing that I can get convicted about. Because when I look back over my life, I talked a little bit this morning about the sins of omission, the sins of commission, the things that we do wrong, that we know they're wrong. And we're certainly sorry for those, but it's the things that we don't do. And, I have great regrets of things that I haven't said, when I haven't spoke up for things, when I've seen injustices happening, or even like someone telling a racist joke or a homophobic joke where I just ignored it and going on. And you're like, when is the place where we stand up?
Yeah.
Jesus goes to the cross. All these bystanders are coming by, and I made the point again today, is that we have, sometimes sentimentalized the cross to a point where, we have this lovely, picturesque hill and this lonely cross up there, but it was in the midst of a crowded place.
Yeah.
Maybe at a crossroads.
Where everybody could see.
It was a violent scene. Rome wanted to show that they were in control.
Yep.
And so they would put it in a place where people would have to walk by. So people walk by, and of course in Matthew, you're seeing a lot of people that are teasing and bullying and mocking. But there's probably some folks in that crowd that are just walking by and just saying, that's not my business. And people who knew that Jesus was innocent.
Yeah.
And yet Jesus is left really to himself to be, to only defend for himself.
And I think that's an interesting thing to think through because, I mean, if something like that were to happen here in Canton, Georgia or something, somebody was crucified in the middle of downtown Canton, everybody was walking by, like, we would all be like horrified, but it was such a common thing back then. So
there was they were desensitized to it for sure.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, I think we can find some parallel things that happen where, we just say, when we see some sort of thing going on. Well, you mentioned like we get real excited and politically correct and put up, the Ukraine flag or whatever on our Facebook page. But do we ever do anything else? Do we ever talk to our congressman? Do we ever, and I'm not saying whether we should or shouldn't,
Right.
but if it's something that is affecting us and we really believe in, then maybe we should.
Yeah.
Or when we hear other people that have sort of like, well, that's their thing, and Russia had every right to invade or whatever. There's this whole thing about Putin these days, and just like because he's a strong man, people were enamored with him, and just like, there's some injustice going on. The stuff with Israel and Palestine, we usually stand on the side of Israel, but there's some horrible things that are happening to Palestinians now. So what do? Because we've been sort of forced into making one side or the other, and not saying, no, there's some inhumane things. There's some things that need to be done.
Yeah.
And so, we can be very much bystanders, and I don't know. It's just like, I don't know exactly how we can be involved, but we're called to it. Maybe we should. And if we're gonna take away from this text, would we have been the ones who were like, well, I can't do anything about Jesus being crucified, so I'm just going to stand over here? Or how would we stand up and intervene in those moments?
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, as you kind of keep following the story, and how even some of the disciples were facing these, like, I don't know what to do now.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
they
thought they had it figured out. They thought they knew what they were standing for. And then everything felt like it changed right in front of them. And they're doubting. They're running away. They're kind of in hiding. You know what I mean? And
right.
They were interesting.
Fearful. And fear's a powerful motivator. Yeah. And I think sometimes we can stand on this side of the story and say, well, look at those cowards.
Yeah.
But, where are we also cowards?
Oh, yeah.
And, those are some hard questions. I think that if we're really going to be our witness at the cross, we've got to find out where is the line where we stand up and say something.
Yeah, there's a line in I don't know if you're familiar with Hamilton the musical. I know you know about it.
Oh yeah.
But there's a line like
very
in one of the songs where they're talking to the character Aaron Burr, well, the historic person Aaron Burr, but in the show. And they look at him and they go, well, if you stand for nothing, what are you falling for? Right. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's such an interesting line to say. And it's kind of the same thing with us, is like, if we claim Christianity, or if we claim to be Christ followers and stuff like that, like, what should we be standing up for?
Yeah. When do we say, because oftentimes we find ourselves retreating as bystanders because we don't have any power in the particular situation. But where is it that we speak truth to power?
Yeah.
It's hard to know. I told the story, and I'll repeat it again here, of my own father. I grew up as a young kid and teenager, in the late 60s, early 70s. And so there was a lot of, there still is racism, but there was a lot more racism, outward racism that went on then. And my father was very much not, against that, to the point where, this is squeaking, to the point where if someone says something racist in front of them, he would call them out and tell them that was inappropriate, and shut it down. And so, and he was a very kind, very gentle man, and he didn't do it in a real, bullying, mean way. He did it in a very polite, gentlemanly way, but he just went. And several times, he owned a business, he owned an auto parts store. Several times as I was hanging out there as a little kid, I saw him do this with people. And one time, which, as I said, was kind of tattooed in my brain is one of those defining memories of me. There was an altercation with him and a guy that came into a store about, the guy was, I don't know, saying all sorts of racist crap.
Right.
And he called him out on it, and the guy got all red-faced and boisterous and stormed out of the door and slammed the door and called him an in-lover as he was living out. And that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And, I was scared in the moment, but I was so proud of my dad. And so, I look at somebody with him, he was a simple guy on our parts store, but he would speak truth in those situations.
Yeah.
And that has convicted me, because I do have regrets of times when I have not said it, where somebody said, a racist or a homophobic joke in front of me, and I hope I haven't, given them the impression that I approved or laughed or anything, but I haven't said anything.
Yeah.
And I regret that, because it's just as simple to say, I don't appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's all you got to say.
And I think especially in our context, and I'm kind of along the same lines as you. Is there's probably been several times that I should have said something about things that I didn't, And sometimes I'll justify it as like, there's no reason to start any other beef or, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
or anything like that. But we are called to stand up for,
Yeah.
you know, in certain spaces and trying to find the bravery to do that. You know, that, I mean, your story really makes me respect your dad. I don't even know him, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that is a very noble thing to do, you know, and I think we should all take lessons from that.
Yeah. And I'm sure it cost him business.
Yeah.
At least that guy's business for sure. But you know, there is risk in that,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, we're all particularly within the church, we try to be peacemakers and try not to upset the apple cart. But
Right.
you know, where is if we're looking at this text today, if we're looking at the theme, you know, where are we in this story if we're becoming the bystanders and maybe even the scoffers, because it's so easy to get pulled into all that. And so, and how do we teach our children to do better?
Yeah.
You know, without being, you don't have to be terribly confrontational all the time about it and, you know, start fights and stuff, but how do we teach them to be peacemakers in that? And I think one of the ways is we can look to Jesus' example,
Yeah.
you know, for sure. And so the scribes and the teachers of the law, they were deriding Jesus. You know, if you know why can't he come down from the cross? You know, if you're the Son of God, come down from the cross. And they had gotten this idea, and it reminded me of the text from earlier where Jesus is out in the wilderness and the devil is tempting him, right?
Right.
And he's like he's up on this thing, and he says like, if you are the Son of God, then jump, or the thing. Then it's a temptation. Jesus knew that was not the path to his kingdom.
Yeah.
And so, just like they thought that the power would be in coming down from the cross, that was how Jesus could show that he was a strong man. You know what? You wonder. Jesus had all temptations too, right? We see that.
Yeah.
You wonder because he could have snapped his finger
and
ended that thing,
right?
But he chose to stay and to bear the cross and to bear our death.
Yeah.
And so that's where the real power was.
Mm-hmm.
The power was enduring the cross, not from coming down from the cross.
Yeah, which again is so countercultural because they looked at leaders as people who were taking over other countries and ruling with strong fist, and here you have kind of a humble Jesus, but willing to sacrifice for his people.
Yeah, and the whole, we're in Black History Month, but the whole nonviolent resistance kind of thing.
Yeah.
And people can't say, how is that powerful? We've got to overthrow, we got to fight back with that. But the whole message of Martin Luther King Jr. was this message of nonviolence.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying this was an easy sermon either. It was I won't say fun to preach, but the stuff came together very easily around this topic. But I don't have a lot of direct answers besides we've got to do better, and we cannot be content to be the bystanders because it's getting worse and worse. We're seeing more and more division. We're seeing more and more bullies. I think bullying is an epidemic. I mean, I feel like I was bullied a little bit in school, and I probably bullied somebody a little bit in school, but it's so much different for what your girls are having to go through with the bullying. I mean, I'm not saying they're being bullied.
Sure.
But
it's out there. And it's, the fact that there's, seminars now on it speaks to the epidemic that you're saying, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like I remember growing up as a kid, like you didn't really talk about it a ton, when it happened, teachers would address it and it'd be done, but now there's a lot of it going on. And because it's also in so many places, it's not just in the playground or it's not just in the classroom, it's online, cell
social
phones,
media,
all that stuff, and navigating those things are tough.
Yeah.
I mean,
I pray for you. It's tough being a parent these days.
It is.
We adults have got to do better, and we adults have got to call out the people that aren't, because I mean, I look at how this has become so desensitized. I think it's so commonplace, like in our political discourse. We're not talking about issues. We're making personal attacks on people. we're, it's one thing to say, hey, I'm a little bit tired of all the Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce. I wish they could just play football. And then saying Taylor Swift is a witch and, they're going to give birth to the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Just crazy stuff that's just out there that's dividing us and,
Right.
and bullying. And I don't know. It's something for us to consider about our own witness at the cross.
Yeah. Where sometimes I think in sermons you're able to drive home like a solution or a point. I think this one is more of a call of reflection and a call to look inwardly of who would you might have been. You know, like would you have been somebody who stood up for the right things? Or are you somebody who's more of a bystander and you just walk through? I do think it's a call for us to be in. I mean, for what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, and I don't mean like to reflect on it and then there be inaction.
Yes.
We need to be active people. And so I hope that it will lead to something about what is it that's going to really be my line.
Yeah.
If someone says a racist joke in front of me, if someone, starts spilling out this sort of bullying, hate, divisive stuff, am I going to stand up in that case and say, well, there's another side to this, or I don't appreciate those kinds of jokes,
right,
or those kind of things. And those little steps I think can lead us to be more just and fair and loving community.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Well, Dave, we are kind of approaching that wrap-up time, and if you didn't see the sermon, go check out the sermon as well. It ties well with what we're talking about here. They kind of build on each other a little bit, which is the design of this whole thing.
Yeah.
But also, if you have any kind of comments, discourse, anything you'd like to share with us, there's comment sections on the Facebook and the YouTube link. Normally it drops on Wednesdays, which if you're here. But we love to hear from you. And if there's anything else you have to say, here's the time.
Nope, we'll be back next week for number 100 in the podcast.
100, absolutely.
All right.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
All right, God bless.